Hey friends, I'm Brigid Kaelin, and I love helping people listen to music a little differently, especially the parts that affect your body and emotions before you even think about the lyrics. So today I want to talk about the teenage love triangle on Taylor Swift's album Folklore. A lot of people have asked me to discuss this, so I'm diving in. We're going to talk about what's happening musically, why it feels the way it does, and how those choices shape the song over time, the story of the song. No music theory required, so don't panic. Just listen. Let's dive in. Okay, before we talk about the music, we need to talk about the story just a little bit. I don't normally talk about lyrics or personal life. I tend to talk about the music and leave the other kinds of clowning to other people. But this one is not fan theory. Taylor Swift herself has talked about this, especially in the Long Pond studio sessions, which is over on Disney Plus, and I really enjoy watching that. It's very cool to see an artist in the studio, no matter who they are, but it's especially cool to see Taylor Swift doing her thing with her brilliant collaborators. So she explicitly described that these three stories are indeed connected, that these three songs are connected, and it's a teenage love triangle. I love that she also talks about how they're fictional characters, and I assume that a lot of people don't believe she ever writes fiction, but I will say I'm a songwriter myself, and I think that that's a lot of the part of why I enjoy writing songs, is because it allows you to try to figure out and understand what might be going on in someone else's mind. So I actually think a lot of her songs, which do begin quite often as very autobiographical, take twists and turns, and I'm not sure that the ones that we think are quite as autobiographical as we assume really are. But that's just me and my experience as a songwriter. But Taylor does talk about three fictional characters named Betty, James, and Augustine. And each song of these three songs, the songs being Betty and Cardigan and August, are sung from a different perspective, one of these three teenagers. And it's a different perspective on the same summer. But anyway, it's not a maybe these songs connect. This is a deliberately constructed narrative system. Also, hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new here and you like this kind of deep dive music theory analysis stuff, you're in the right place. Okay, quick version of the story. James and Betty are together. James cheats on Betty over the summer. They're 17 or so, and he cheats on her with Augustine. Augustine falls in love. James goes back to Betty, making excuses as to why he had this summer fling. And then Cardigan is Betty talking from her perspective years later, looking back. If I got that wrong, let me know in the comments. As if the comments section ever let anything I said wrong slide. For you visual learners, let's recap quickly. Cardigan, track 2, is from the point of view of Betty, who is looking back on that summer of heartbreak and talking about the teenage feelings of angst. And it's 20 years later after, and assuming that she and James did end up together. And we know this because Taylor talked about it in the Long Pond sessions. The next track 8 of the trilogy, is August, and that's from the point of view of Augustine, who is the teenage girl who James has a summer fling with. And so she really liked him. She's really sad, so she's singing about that summer and unrequited love. And of course, track 14 is Betty. That's the one that is the point of view of James, the cheater. And he is so sorry for cheating, and he runs up to her and apologizes in this kind of grand gesture, I guess. And people have asked me to examine in particular how these songs might be connected musically, and that's my jam. So music has a lot to do with math and numbers, and we know that Taylor Swift loves numbers, but this isn't going to be calculus or anything, so don't panic. Let's start with how does the album present these two songs, because they're not three in a row. Cardigan is track 2. August is track 8. Betty is track 14. They're perfectly spaced by 6 tracks. If we're getting really nerdy into numerology, we've got 2 plus 8 plus 14 is equal to 24, and then 2 plus 4 equals 6. Or you could do it the other way and go 2 plus 8 plus 1 plus 4, track 14 being 1 and 4. And that equals 15. 1 plus 5 equals 6. So we keep coming back to 6. The 6 seems kind of deliberate, especially when you're looking at a love triangle. So the timeline as the story is presented, though, in chronological order of what happens in these stories, it's scrambled. In chronological order, the first song that happens is August, but that's actually the middle song that's presented on the album. After August, after the summer fling, August, would come Betty, which is James apologizing to Betty for his errors. And then Cardigan happens 20 years later, reflecting back. So by the time on the album when we hear James sing, I'm only 17, I don't know anything, we've already heard Betty. In fact, the whole thing begins with Betty's reflection. I'm digging into lyrics too much, but I just kind of wanted to set up the story. Let's start with August. Now, I listened to these and I kind of charted these out, so I'm going to refer to them. I'll make another video about how I make these charts. And I will make these charts available on my Patreon page. So if you're coming there from there, look back on the Patreon page, which will be linked below, and there will be links to the free downloads. All right, starting with August. The first sound you hear, and you know, if you know my channel, that I like to talk about the sound and the audio stuff, not just the pitches and the chords. Note that. It is a drone of a C. Now, the song August lives in a sort of loop for the most part. The chord progression mostly goes 1, 4, 2, 5. It's in the key of F major, 1 flat. 1, 4, 2, 5. The verses here go 1, 4, 2 minor, and then they don't cycle up to the 5th. So the verses just go 1, 4, 2, and then they do another measure of that. 2 to 5 is a very, very common chord progression. Now, don't panic if you don't know this stuff. It doesn't matter. We're going to look at the patterns, and I'll show you what that means. But just saying that mostly the chords don't change a lot. They kind of loop over and over. There's also 1 chord per measure, very consistent harmonically and rhythmically. That just means the whole chord lasts for 4 beats. 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead of like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Jumping around. The other 2 songs, I also charted those here. Well, yeah. I'll put those up on my Patreon also. And they're just kind of my handwritten charts, which is, I think, I don't know, it's kind of cool to see how people chart songs out, but you can use them to play the songs if you know Nashville numbers. If you don't, I've got another video about reading Nashville numbers. August doesn't really make a lot of use of the 6th chord. The other 2 songs in this trilogy here do use the 6th chord. And remember, 6 was important earlier. So the only moment in August where you hear the 6th chord in F major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's the 1, there's the 6, or 1, 6. The only moment where you might hear the 6th chord, and there's some kind of debate because people could chart this chord actually as a different way. They could say that it's a 4 chord with just a 6 in the bass. Music theory nerdiness. The only chance that you might even think there's a 6th chord is in the very second chorus. And I think that's interesting harmonically too, because the choruses are different in August. So it's August, to a moment in time. Never mind. But the second one goes August slipped away from So instead of starting on the 1 chord, it starts on the 6th chord. That's an interesting flip because the 6th chord, it always reminds me of that Leonard Cohen song, Hallelujah, where he says the minor lift. You might expect the 1, but instead you get the 6. Now, if you couldn't hear the difference between the 1 and the 6, don't freak out. Don't worry about it. This is the 1 in this song, F being the most important tone. The chord built on that. The 6 is this. So it has 2 of the same notes. So they should sound similar. 1, 6. If you heard the difference, cool. If not, you're just focusing on these 2 notes. No biggie. What matters emotionally, though, is that we don't usually live in the 6 chord space in August. The 6th chord is typically where you get kind of deep emotional weight, nostalgia, that sort of typical sad feeling. It's the relative minor of the major, so it's just, an alternative home. But in August, the minor chord that does most of the heavy lifting throughout the song is actually the 2 minor chord. G minor. There's your 1. There's your 2. The 2 chord typically, and again, this is all based on your experience with Western music, but for the most part, the 2 chord is a little more forward moving. It's a little less grounded in reflection, so I think that actually fits the idea that the narrator of this story, August, is actually in the moment, not like reflecting back on it the way Cardigan feels. And in the verses of this, the two verses of this, it goes 1, 4, 2 minor. Everything else is 1, 4, 2 minor, 5. And again, 2 to 5 is a very common chord progression, but instead she waits and lingers and repeats that 2 minor chord, lingering on it instead of doing the expected move to the 5. Now, the outro of August, it's basically the same 4 measures, a phrase repeated 6 times. And it's 1, 4, 2 minor, 5, fading out slowly but repeated 6 times. And it becomes kind of trance-like the whole song feels, I think. As it fades out and repeats itself, it becomes almost hypnotic, trance-like you're caught up in something and you can't stop it, even though maybe you want to. Everything is just kind of moving forward on its own. This is not a story with somebody, a narrator who has agency. It's just the moment. She's kind of caught up in the moment and it's just carrying itself along. And I like how that fits in with the storyline. Like, this is just a summer thing and we didn't realize it was happening and it just kind of happened. Kind of like how the lyrics say, back when I was living for the hope of it all. And many other lyrics. There's more I could say about August. Maybe I'll do a separate deep dive on that. But I want to have time to talk about all three of these. So let's look at Cardigan. Cardigan, just like August, also uses one chord per measure and a very steady rhythm and harmony. Here's a detail I love. So the very first lyrics, the first verse of Cardigan start exactly at 6 seconds in. In August, also, the very first lyrics, first verse begin at 6 seconds in. So there's back to 6 again. It's the same delay, the same kind of soft entry. And of course, both of these songs are told by the two women, or I guess they're girls. Depends if you're talking about them as teenagers, as or adults, I guess. But, we're being eased into the story at 6 seconds. August begins the verse on the 1 chord. Cardigan begins the verse on the 2 minor chord. So 2 stories, 2 separate places, 2 beginnings. They're not going to be the same POV, right? And of course, just to remind you, August is from Augustine's point of view. Cardigan is from Betty's point of view. Other interesting thing from the beginning is that Cardigan begins in the left speaker only. Do you remember how, sorry, I'm looking at my notes, how August began in the right speaker only? Put on headphones and listen. August begins in the right speaker, Cardigan begins in the left speaker. It's harmonically different. Its whole thing begins on the 2 chord. It doesn't begin at home, it begins somewhere else. It also ends on a 4 chord, unlike August, which ended on a 5 chord.
So 3 songs. August ends on the 5 chord, which is your whole shave and a haircut, the one that makes it hard to hear. It's like ending there. You really need that resolution, but we don't get it. Cardigan ends on a 4 chord, which is more dreamlike, away from home. Betty also ends on the 4 chord, dreamlike, away from home. And I really like that the song sung from Betty and James's point of view and on the 4 chord, both of them, because we do know, as Taylor said, they both end up together. So their songs end the same.
Even though August faded out, but the very last chord I hear is a 5. So Cardigan feels reflective. We're looking back at this, but we don't really sit at home. There's not a lot of time spent on the 1 chord, which is typically a home base. It's what our ears recognize as the feeling of the most important pitch, frequency in the song, the one that feels relaxed and settled. We don't spend a lot of time there. Ending on the 4, so Cardigan's here, and it ends on the 4 there. The 4 is a very dreamlike chord. It doesn't mean that you're about to go home. It means that you're somewhere else entirely. But it does feel unsettling, but not quite as much as ending on the 5 chord. Ending on the 5 chord stops an expectation from your ears. But when you're on the 4 chord, you think it might go somewhere else, but it doesn't grab your ears as in like, please, you have to bring me home. Not in the way that, if I just stop there, that's very annoying. You really need that. You're welcome. But if I was like, we're just somewhere else, dreamlike, suspended, like maybe we're not going home at all. And that's okay. And it makes sense because memories, dreams, they don't always resolve neatly. Sometimes they just stop, but sometimes you just sort of wake up and you don't need to know the ending. It was just kind of a pleasant memory. But that ending is really important. The last few seconds of Cardigan are really chaotic sonically. There's a lot of audio layers going on. There are details, they are layered. There's some old sounds and new sounds. There's acoustic, electronic elements, like a whole bunch of memories kind of colliding with itself, getting chaotic. But it's not stressful. It's just introspective. And at the end, there's essentially just a drone of an A-flat chord. I also need to talk about the very opening of Cardigan. I assume people have talked about this. I haven't seen it. I think I saw like one Reddit conversation of it. But this cool thing about the opening of Cardigan is that it begins with this kind of clippity-clop sound and a whir, like a white noise thing almost. And it sounds like walking on cobblestones. And given the lyric in there, I assume it's actually high heels on cobblestones. I do want to do a thing in this video where I overlap the beginnings and endings of each of these songs and show you how they could be connected musically. This A-flat drone, it has this note, a C in it. Now, the opening chord of August is F major, which has that C in it, so I can make it work. If I take the end of Cardigan, layer the beginning of August over it, Not a perfect blend, but it's not completely out of the blue either. There is a shared tone for holding those two things together, those two storylines, different perspectives. Maybe some of the truth is the same, but not all of it. Cardigan is in E flat major. August is in F major. It's a whole step apart. E flat to F. So even tonally, which just means, tonally the main tone of the key, we're being lifted out of memory where Cardigan lies. And we are going to a different place, kind of the immediacy of the experience. Also, if you're still with me, you are absolutely my people. Could you please hit subscribe? Thank you. And then there's Betty. Betty's completely different. First of all, the verse doesn't even start till about 11 seconds in. Remember, the other two started at 6 seconds, so I was hoping they would be the same. But this is the one from the boy's point of view. It's different. So we get a longer, more dramatic setup. It's a little bit more performative. And remember what's going on lyrically is this boy is trying to apologize to Betty and explain himself as to why he cheated on her. So this setup feels a little more staged. I love that as the point of view of a 17-year-old boy who has definitely rehearsed the apology in his head. Musically, this feels like it was written on the guitar. You get this classic movement, which hopefully I'll show you. This C descending bass chord progression is a pretty cool, but not terribly complex way to play something on the guitar. So it makes this nice. You can kind of just descend. C, B, A, G, F. You could keep going. Well, no longer than that, but. It's a descending bass line. It's very, very common in pop music and folk music because it's very easy to play on the guitar.
I dream a dream that love is real. I meet Alvarino, I was trailed by 20 bells. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. It ain't no use to sit and wonder why.
It's intuitive. C major also, which is the key that Betty begins in, is interesting because it's very basic. It's the simplest key. It has no sharps, no flats. You don't have to bother with the black keys at all. And it's where a lot of people start when they're learning music. They learn in the key of C major. So it's innocent, it's young. And just as a side note, Taylor Swift's very first single and the first song on her first album, Tim McGraw, is written in C major. Does that have to do with the other? I don't know. We can't prove anything. But it does kind of reinforce that feeling that this is the most young, naive, unguarded perspective of the three of them, maybe. Although August feels pretty young too. But anyway, here's one of the big musical differences anyway. Betty uses 2 chords per measure most of the time. Can you see that? Each little box is 1 measure. And so, whereas August here's Cardigan. Cardigan has 1 of them written in each little box. Betty has 2 in most of them. And sometimes those don't get equal beats either. Sometimes it's syncopated. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It switches in between the beat. It's called syncopation when things happen on the offbeat, not when you're tapping your toes to it. So compared to August and Cardigan, which both have 1 chord per measure, Betty is more active and restless. It kind of feels like somebody talking really quickly, like chaotically trying to get all the details in, explaining themselves maybe a little too much. And then at that very last chorus in Betty, that another time when it's, yeah, I showed up at your party, not like if I showed up at your party, and it happens right around 4 minutes and 5 seconds into it, which strangely is exactly when Cardigan and August finish. Like, I love that too, because like the 2 women have kind of finished what they're saying succinctly, and then James like just keeps on going. The women knew when to stop speaking, but James is like, wait, I have more. Do you need to be this dramatic, James? Like, really? 17-year-old boys, I suppose they do need to be that dramatic. And so he's not just continuing on talking, he actually does a key change there. We go from C major to D major. It's not smooth and even, it's quick, and it's just like very dramatic. Like the drama of showing up at the party, I guess, or continuing to talk when maybe you've already made your point. And then Betty ends on a lingering 4 chord. G in this case, because we've moved to the key of D. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lands on G.
So remember, landing on the 4 chord leaves things feeling unresolved, but kind of dreamlike.
So I like this as the point of view of James going, what do you think, Betty? What do you think? What do you think? Is it okay? Am I forgiven? But then he doesn't give an answer. We just end there. Or his version of the story doesn't land. Maybe she's like, nice try. Let's cut you off. But yeah, we never get an answer. We don't get the completion on that song. So another fun part is how the songs connect sonically. If you move from August into Betty, August ends on the 5 chord, C major. Betty is in C major, starts on C. So if you overlap them, it fits perfectly. Love that. But if you try to go back from Betty into Cardigan, it doesn't work the same way. See, Betty ends on
G major.
and Cardigan starts on F minor. That clashes. But because Cardigan actually opens with that percussion and maybe the high heels on cobblestones, you can align it carefully and make it sound kind of cool, which I think I've done here. So yeah, you can sort of loop them into a triangle if you wanted. But to be fair, you can probably do that with a lot of songs if you try hard enough. So when people ask, do these songs have anything in common musically? The answer is yes, but it's not wildly obvious. They do share a lack of harmonic resolution. That's a very fancy way to say they don't end on the one chord. You don't get your clean ending. You don't get your Instead, you get, we end here, or we end there, and that's it. They don't end on the one at all. They don't ever end where we feel like we got a good answer. I do like the idea of Cardigan beginning in the left speaker, August beginning in the right speaker, and Betty, which I didn't tell you this, Betty is centered completely. And since Betty is from James's point of view, the boy who has two girls, two women on either side of him, that's sonically a super interesting choice and obviously deliberate. She's over there, and the boy is stuck in the middle. Like, who am I talking to? Make a choice, James, make a choice. And also, Betty and August don't talk to each other. They're far away. Maybe that would have been better. You know, if the women could just talk to each other instead of being pitted against each other, perhaps everything would have ended up even better in the story. But yeah, importantly, I like how each song uses music to reflect how the character telling the story experiences each event. Like August is very hypnotic, like you're just carried away in the moment. It's hypnotic and looping and kind of out of control, just keeps repeating and moving on at its own pace. Cardigan is steady, also but reflective, memory filtered, the high heels on cobblestones. There's lots of cool sounds happening throughout. Betty moves around, kind of actively shifting like it's trying to justify. But it's also, we don't know who's telling the truth. And I think even the setup and the story on the album, the way that she presents these three tracks, the structure doesn't ever clarify anything for us. It's not presented in chronological order. It's a love triangle. There are three different versions of the truth. We have three different keys, and then the one sung by the point of view of the boy has two different keys in the same song. Two different keys, two different women. Which one's right? I don't know, but I'm going to try them both. Yeah, so three different versions of the truth. I'm your wife. Sorry, my kids are watching The Princess Bride. So three different versions of the truth, and none of them fully resolves. Remember, resolving means ending on the home key. If you want those chord charts, head over to my Patreon page. Thank you so much, guys. Mwah.